Slotkin questioned the man who now holds Esper's post. Senator Alyssa Slotkin questioned the man who now holds Esper's job, Pete Hegseth.
Have you given the order to be able to shoot at unarmed protesters in any way? I'm just asking the question. Don't laugh. Like the whole country. And by the way, my colleagues across the aisle.
What is that based on? What evidence would you have that an order like that has ever been given?
Giving that order to your predecessor, to a Republican Secretary of Defense, who I give a lot of credit to because he didn't accept the order. He had more guts and balls than you because he said, I'm not going to send in the uniformed military to do something that I know in my gut isn't right. He was asked to shoot at their legs. He wrote that in his book. That's not hearsay. So your poo-pooing of this, it just shows you don't understand who we are as a country, who we are. And all of my colleagues across the aisle, especially the ones that served, should want an apolitical military and not want citizens to be scared of their own military. I love the military. I served alongside my whole life, so I'm worried about you tainting it. Have you given the order? Have you given the order that they can use lethal force against honor? I want the answer to be no. Please tell me it's no. Have you given the order?
Senator, I'd be careful what you read in books and believing it, except for the Bible.
Oh my God. So your former predecessor, I guess that's not enough for you.
That moment is where we start the hour with Senator from Michigan, Senator Alyssa Slotkin. Thank you so much for being here. I am a student of that paragraph of that book, of that chapter in American political history, of all the people who are in the room. And if you could just help me relive that moment. I mean, it is written about by Mark Esper. It's a standoff in the Oval Office with Stephen Miller. Mark Milley was in the Oval Office as well. And it is about invoking the Insurrection Act. It's about using the military in historic ways. Tell me what you think when you can't get the current Secretary of Defense to tell all of us and you that that'll never happen.
Yeah, I think the thing that you want him to give a simple answer, right? And in other questions, he gave a simple answer. But there just seems to be this impossibility for him of just saying, look, I'm going to protect and defend the Constitution. I'm never going to execute an illegal order. I love the military, and so I'm never going to let that happen because he's so devoted to Donald Trump. He doesn't want to do anything that gets him in more trouble. And it just, you think about Secretary Esper when he was, in those important conversations with the president. Your character really matters. These things really matter. And what if he hadn't had that character? What if that Secretary of Defense had gone out and said, you know what, all these peaceful protesters, just shoot at them to get them to move. They're making the president look weak. We'd be in a very different moment right now. So I think it's deeply frustrating, especially for me as someone who served at the Pentagon, worked alongside the military. I don't want Americans to live in fear of their own military.
Well, and the military doesn't want that either. I mean, just explain the dynamic for the National Guard in any state, but right now we have them in LA. They are largely from the community. They're now patrolling. What is that like for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, the National Guardsmen are dentists and doctors and construction workers and people who either served before or want to serve in a part-time capacity when they're, and in addition to having a full-time job. So they very much are of the community. And I got a lot of staff and former staff that are guardsmen, and they have almost no training on how to do things in a law enforcement context. That's the thing that we're sort of missing here. It's not just about uniformed folks showing up in a city. It's about what are they trained to do, especially a Marine, right? An active duty Marine. They are trained to go after the enemy in a ruthless way, and we like that. That's a positive thing where we're dealing with adversaries abroad. But it's a very different thing to bring that same Marine into an urban setting. They've had, as we heard the head of the Marine Corps say, 2 hours of training on law enforcement techniques. It's just a very different approach to the world, and you don't want mistakes. You don't want them getting jittery and shooting at someone by mistake and causing a bigger problem. So it's not just about the letter of the law. It's about the training that the military has or doesn't have in the kinds of things we're asking them to do.
A former senior military official told me that it's that piece, but it's also the self-selection. The people who go into the military for a reason, that if they wanted to patrol and protect, they would pursue law enforcement. And sometimes at the beginning of their careers, they're at a fork in the road. But just talk about what we're putting the men and women of the military through right now to even be debating their deployment on the streets of American cities.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, like you said, people sign up for the military for a bunch of reasons, but usually because they want to serve their country, they want to protect us from harm, they don't want attacks in the homeland, they want to protect us. And so that is a very different job description than policing streets, than detaining and arresting people, than trying to control unarmed protesters when you haven't had that non-lethal force training. So I don't think that the average person, I know they don't sign up to do that. I think that officer you spoke to was right, that you could go into law enforcement if that's what you want to do and get the right training. But I think the thing that, again, I tried to highlight in the testimony is, we want to look at our uniformed men and women and say, that's someone who's here to make me safe. That's not someone I fear. And by putting the military in these positions, in these adversarial roles, they are risking politicizing them and making them seem like just a political wing of this president, when in fact they swear an oath to the Constitution, not to any one man. So it concerns me. I'm from Michigan, right? And the National Guard was called in 1967 in Detroit during our riots. The riots were bad. No one disputes that. But the National Guard coming in made it worse because they didn't have the training. It went on for days, and people still talk about it and remember that. So I don't want that for the whole rest of the country.
So as a woman who's covered the Trump era for 9 years, I cannot let another moment go by without asking you about saying something out loud that people say off TV all the time, that none of them has the balls to do the right thing. What is your assessment of why Hegseth is so afraid of Trump?
I think everybody, a lot of these political appointees have been very concerned about doing anything that would anger them because they know they'd lose their job. Right? They know they'd have their nomination pulled. And there's varying degrees of it. And for Secretary Hegseth, he has always been the most nervous, most concerned, most hedging, most agitated when you ask him a straight up question about the Constitution. It's noticeable. And then he's had a rough first few months, right? He's in the spotlight. We're talking more about his conduct and his behavior and use of signal for war plans than we are about the leadership. And I think that makes him even more concerned. But again, these shouldn't be hard questions. And frankly, the four-star general sitting next to him, we went through, General Kane, when we went through his confirmation hearing, he could answer those questions. No, I won't accept an illegal order. I swear an oath to the Constitution. He answered it straight. And that's all we're asking for from the man who controls the entire U.S. military.
So where does it leave us as a country if the sitting Secretary of Defense will not say under oath to a sitting United States Senator that he will not refuse an illegal order?
Well, I think, look, I mean, we're right on the edge here. I don't think anyone's missing that, that we are seeing things that don't look like America. And, I started to go through kind of a question. I thought to myself, what if during the military parade, a protester had jumped out in front of a tank? What would the guidance have been to do with that unarmed protester? He's blocking traffic. And it made me think of another country. It made me think of China. It made me think of Tiananmen Square. And I can't fathom that as someone who served in the CIA proudly and who did 3 tours in Iraq and who believes in this country. And I think the thing that is making people speak up and speak out is it just doesn't look like the country they were raised on and they believe in, and they don't want to let that happen.
What does it say to you, and what does it say to the men and women in the intelligence, various agencies, that Trump today came out and said, well, I don't believe Tulsi Gabbard when it comes to Iran's nuclear capabilities? Yeah,
I mean, I think there are not that many people who believed that Trump was going to kind of listen to the intelligence community and do exactly sort of what they say, or base his determinations on what they produce. I thought it was a little pointed, and we'll see how long Tulsi is still being led into the Oval Office to give briefs and those kinds of things. But I think it's clear that Trump is not taking his cues from the intelligence community. And again, that's not hidden. He's changing his approach, particularly on things in the Middle East, every couple of hours. And I think it's indicative of this administration. They're just not doing it in a way that's based in fact and intelligence and reality.
What would your counsel be if he were to call you and ask you what to do?
On LA or on the Middle East?
Let's start with the Middle East.
Yeah. So look, I mean, again, my view of what's going on in the Middle East right now is completely colored by doing 3 tours in Iraq alongside the military, right? During those 3 tours, I was constantly being hit by Iranian rockets and mortars and improvised explosive devices that the Iranians use to kill Americans, target and kill Americans. They use terrorism, they use ballistic missiles, and they've been very clear for years that they have nuclear ambitions. So I have a real problem with Iran. That's clear. But I also served in Iraq when I watched this war go on and on and on and become a forever war. Right? I saw what it looks like to go in thinking you have everything you need to do that first strike, and you think it'll be quick and easy. And then you get stuck and bogged down, and you're there for another 20 years. So that's why I asked Secretary Hegseth today, like, what kind of day after planning are you doing? No one doubts that the U.S. military could conduct a serious operation, sophisticated operation. I don't doubt that. But what happens the next day? What happens if a pilot goes down? Are you going to use ground troops? What's the plan when they start attacking the 40,000 U.S. servicemen and women who are in the Middle East? So I think, the administration is having an internal fight, a cat fight about who they want to be and whether they want to do this or not do this. But my view on this is deeply connected to my real problem with Iran and also my real problem with getting into wars accidentally.
Do you have any faith that there's anyone that has access to Trump, who's the ultimate, I guess, policymaker or decision maker here, who has that understanding that you just articulated?
I literally do believe that there is a tug of war going on within the administration. I can hear it. I mean, it's not hidden, right? When you have people like Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon coming out against the president, those are kind of his guys, or traditionally were. So I think there's an isolationist group who doesn't want anything to do with it, who sees that we could be on the edge of getting embroiled in something. And then there's a more hawkish group that want him to go. And I think the president he's been open that he has to make a decision. I just want it to be on our terms as the United States of America, do it for our reasons, on our timing, on our, schedule. So because if we're going to risk American men and women, it should be thoroughly reviewed and discussed, not just what it takes to operate and drop something, but what it means the day after.
And Senator, because you asked, let me ask your thoughts about what the best path forward is for the military, now that they've been deployed in Los Angeles. What is the best decision making from this point forward?
Well, the use of the uniformed military in the United States of America should be a last resort. If law enforcement completely cannot control a situation, a governor says, please help me, then fine, right? We've had that happen before, but that's not what's going on right now, and we all know it. I don't know why we're pretending that this isn't for political reasons. Some of the largest numbers of undocumented immigrants in the country are in Texas and Florida, and you don't see one question about putting in a uniform in those places, right? So we know what this is. To me, we should make our military an apolitical body. We should not use them as the arm of any one political goal or political party, because it's bigger than that. And we don't want to set that precedent, right? I mean, the Republican governors would lose their ever-loving mind if a Democratic president sent in the National Guard and Marines to their state without their permission. Kristi Noem was a governor. Ask her. I did. I asked her in her confirmation hearing. They would lose their ever-loving minds. So you don't want to set this precedent for our country. So that's what they should do. Get out of the cities and stop using it as a political tool.
Senator, what did Hegseth come back to you? Did he have any response? Because it's not often that members of Trump's cabinet get confronted with the truth, that they don't have the balls to stand up for the Constitution if it means potentially displeasing the dear leader.
No. I mean, I think it seemed to make him uncomfortable. It was the end of a long hearing.
Yes.
And again, I don't know what goes on in the privacy of his own office or, about decision making on these things. But I know that if I'm him, I want to stand up in front of all of those uniformed military that I represent there and say we're not going to use them in ways that violate the Constitution. That should not be a controversial statement.
It should not be a hard question to answer. Senator Alyssa Slotkin, thank you so much.